from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome back. Welcome back to the Rutgers Rant. Welcome back to a lot of things, right? Oof. We've got, we think, we expect, we hope. What's the right verb here, fellas? Is that too loud?
We anticipate.
We anticipate? Great show, by the way. Welcome back, Connor. Welcome back, Greg Schiano. Is this it? Have we gotten it? I mean, all signs point to the fact that we have reached the moment of the coaching search that I think everybody wanted to happen. A lot of people wanted to happen. Everybody expected to happen. That said, it still felt like the way this thing went on that, there's an element of, wow, we got here, and surprise. Do you feel that way today, Sar? Just given the twists and turns, given the, different smoke signals coming out of Piscataway, just the way this thing was going early on, that, to get to the point where we believe a meeting will take place this week that will, get Greg Schiano back as head coach. What do you think?
So I'll say yes and no. And the reason why I say that is because I think from day one, Pat Hobbs tried to make it clear that he was going to be the guy who's making a call. He wanted to make it clear that it was going to be his call, not the boosters, not a search committee within the school, meaning donors and fans and other administrators. He wanted to make it clear it was his call. And I think right from the get-go, I think we kind of, let the public know as best as possible that Pat Hobbs was he was a little leery of hiring Greg Schiano for a number of reasons. I think he wanted to look at other candidates from the get-go. I will say this, that there were, a few other people, at a major university when you're talking about board of governors and you're talking about really, influential people who told me from the beginning, Greg Schiano was going to be a short list candidate, meaning he was going to be in until the end. I believe that all along. We're here now. I think we're to the point where I think an offer will be made. And if it is, we have to keep in mind, Greg Schiano still has not given any clear indication whether he wants the job. So, but I do think that, the flirtation, is underway, and we'll see where it goes.
So it is. I mean, yeah, and I guess we should say that up front. It's possible this could get screwed up. I mean, until it's done, it's not done. And knowing, Greg, as long as we have the expectation, I was told from the beginning that if there's a meeting with Greg Schiano, it's the end game. It's not. They're not interviewing Greg Schiano like they interviewed Butch Jones. They're going to him and saying, all right, let's get this done, because there've been conversations taking place. He's a guy they know, a known quantity. Cratch, let's go through this here. In your mind, give me what you think the pros are to bringing back Schiano, and give me what you think some of the cons are to this deal today.
Well, I think the pros are, and I've said this a lot, the minute Greg is hired as head coach, all of your football program's issues outside the white lines are solved.
Right.
This is a guy who, I don't know if he's going to sell 10,000 season tickets by the opener against Monmouth, but they're going to sell season tickets. They're going to have the biggest spring game crowd they've had in a long time. It would not shock me if all the money for that field house they want to put where the bubble is, if that suddenly gets shaked out of the couch pretty quickly. I just think, Greg is going to create a sense of excitement. He's going to fire up the fan base. You're going to get national media attention. You might get New York media attention. That's not negative. That's not pointing fun at Rutgers, not mocking it. Like, there's going to be a buzz that this is happening. This is coming back. I mean, I would be stunned if Greg gets a job if he doesn't pick up a big name recruiter too.
Absolutely.
And I think that's going to feed into it. It's going to be, all that buzz that he created the first time, and he's coming in here now. But I think the cons are, what he did here was special, and he gave the program its dignity in the modern era, but it's still going to be a hard climb up from where they are now. I think they're a lot closer to being, a 4 to 6 win team than people think at this moment. But Rutgers has bigger aspirations than 4 to 6 wins every year.
Right.
Pat Hobbs said the word Rose Bowl. And I just wonder if, people have been saying this whole, you can't go home again, never works well the second time. That's a little bit of silliness, in my opinion. Like, I even saw someone say, well, it didn't work for Bill Snyder. And I went and looked at Bill Snyder, his second stint at Kansas State. he won 5 or more games every year, and he went to the Cotton Bowl and the Fiesta Bowl.
Yeah, we'd sign for that.
I think Rutgers fans are going to sign up for that.
That'd be okay. That'd be okay.
Like Mike Riley, basically recruited the kids that won the Pac-12 for Dennis Erickson, and then came back and went to a bowl game every year. I think Rutgers will take that.
Right.
So, look, I've always thought that Greg's the guy who excites the fan base. He galvanizes the fan base. And I think, look, at the end of the day, Greg Schiano has proven he's a very good football coach. I think that he's going to get this program to a point where they are going to a bowl game regularly. They're winning 6-7 games every year. I just don't know how fast that's going to happen.
Right.
I think that's the one con is that for whatever reason, it just doesn't work out, because I think the last thing that Rutgers would ever want to have to do going forward is fire Greg Schiano.
That would be rough. All right. So, sorry, this is the interesting dynamic. If it really does happen this week, and I had someone ask me all right, well, what is he going to coach the last 3 games? I was like, wait a minute. Well, no, of course not. But I thought, well, I mean, it's not a crazy question to ask. I mean, you're hiring him as a head coach. You're bringing him in with a quarter of the season still to go. Is there a chance? I mean, what does he do during that time? Especially given, and this is a funny intel I got from someone, that it didn't dawn on me until, I gave it a lot of thought, but someone mentioned that he might be in a better position not as head coach, in that doesn't have like a mountain of NCAA rules to follow. If he wants to call a recruit, if he wants to call build staff, do things outside the boundaries of being, the guy who must follow these restrictions, he's in a better position to do it now than he might be, the moment he walks into that building. So in your mind, Sarge, what happens in the next 3 weeks, 4 weeks, if he does get the job while the season's going on?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I actually had a fan actually ask me the same thing on Twitter DM. What I'll say is this, to the latter point, and I thought about that too. Yeah, I think maybe you're able to talk to the Alfano or the guys who are in the grad transfer portal or high school recruits. The only problem with that is you're also, and I agree that there's not any set NCAA rules prohibiting it. But if it does turn out that you had a secret deal with Greg Schiano, in September, and he was recruiting, and there's a paper trail to it, it could lead to the NCAA or someone calling foul, and you just don't know, and you never know. So let's just do it, on the up and up, and not lead to some sort of investigation down the line where an opposing Big Ten coach is calling foul, saying that Greg Schiano is recruiting for Rutgers. He hasn't even been named a coach yet. No one wants that. On the other hand, if you do hire him, what happens? My understanding, talking to people behind the scenes, the plan would be he would not coach the final 3 games. That would be Nunzio Campanelli would be allowed to finish out the season. Whether he can recruit, that's a good question. That's a question I probably need to get answered at this point, because if you remember Tim Pernetti, when he hired after Greg Schiano abruptly left, there was a couple of days before signing day, he took the test to become certified to become an NCAA recruiter. At the time, there was a slot open with with staff, obviously, because Greg was leaving and there were other assistants leaving, so he could do that. Right now, they're all filled up on the coaching staff. I don't think at this point, certainly Nunzio would be allowed to, if he does finish out the season. And then you'd have 10 assistants trying to finish out the season. I don't think he'd be allowed to be on the road. NCAA rules, I don't think he'd be allowed to be on the road. It's an interesting question, something that we still don't know the answer to.
Yeah. All right. So, it's just been a weird process from the beginning. We had a lot of questions. I mean, we forget that if this podcast had things not done differently, we might have been talking about Butch Jones for the opening segment. He was interviewed on Friday. By all accounts, everybody in the room, and I heard someone said that Butch blew them away. It was a quote I heard. I don't know how true that is. Certainly, it seems like that this process was heading toward Greg, even when they had Butch Jones in the room, which begs the question. You're spending $88,000 on a search firm. I mean, what really happened here, Crash? Do you think was this whole thing from the beginning just one long thing to get here? Was it just the realization that he was the guy? I mean, give me a sense of, do you think that this went off the rails at some point where they realized they weren't going to get a Moorhead, they weren't getting another candidate? What's your sense?
my sense is probably that they reached a conclusion where the candidates that were currently with teams that they might be interested in, they probably just realized none of these guys are are better than Butch or Greg.
Right.
So I mean, like that's, Joe Moorhead. If Joe Moorhead goes 8-5 again at Mississippi State, and they might be tired of him in Starkville, but he's not like toxic, he probably is still a candidate. But it's fallen apart there. It's been a disaster. Jason Campbell at Toledo. That ship has sailed when he was a 28-point favorite to Bowling Green and lost.
Yeah.
Lance Leopold, it was very clear that like if Lance Leopold was the hire, like no one was going to come to the games anymore. That's the way people were acting. So, and I think they probably realized through this search firm that can kind of have those kind of clandestine, not supposed to happen, but they're happening everywhere kind of conversations. They probably realized that there was no slam dunk, like there was no stunning, like 2015, when Sarge reported, Dan Mullen was interested in the job potentially. Like there was no Dan Mullen, like
right.
out of the blue candidate out there. So at that point, Butch is interested. Greg's at least going to take a meeting. And I think you're right. Like I go back to, the famous story about when Florida, when Steve Spurrier wanted to go back to Florida, which was the Carolina job, and Jeremy Foley, the AD, said like, okay, like send your resume and we'll interview you. And Steve's response was like, go walk down the hallway and look at the trophy case. Like that's my interview. And he said it a little bit more profanely, but that's the sort of thing with Greg. You're not gonna like sit down. If you're gonna meet with Greg, you're offering him the job. Yeah. And so I think at this point, it looks to me that they want to hire Greg. And if something happens, I think maybe they interview one more or two more candidates, but they probably feel pretty good about Butch.
Yeah. All right. Let's dive into true or false, guys. We know how it works. Give me a true or false answer. And then at the end, we'll discuss the topics. All right. True or false? Greg Schiano means a change at athletic director. Sarge, true or false?
False.
Cratch?
False.
All right. Interesting. We'll get back to that one, certainly. True or false? Rutgers will not score again in the final 3 games of the season. Sarge?
False.
Cratch?
False.
True or false? Rutgers will not score more than 2 touchdowns in the final 3 games of the season. Sarge?
True.
Cratch?
True.
Yeah, that's where we're at, I think. True or false? The team MVP of the 2019 Scarlet Knights is Aaron Young. True or false?
False.
Cratch?
False.
The team MVP is Isaiah Pacheco. True or false? Sarge?
False.
Cratch?
False.
The team MVP is Adam Korsak. True or false? Sarge?
I mean, don't make Cratch answer. We know what his answer is, so just move forward. I'm going to say true.
Cratch?
True.
Yeah, I was trying to think of somebody else. It's not easy. True or false? Rutgers botched the 150th anniversary, and it's too late to save it. Sarge, true or false?
True.
Cratch?
True.
Yeah, it's sad, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I want to go back to the first one at the AD, and it's there are many. I was coming up with a list of things, questions I have, unanswered questions about what's going to happen here if and when Schiano takes this job, and that's number 1 on my list. And I'm curious if Pat Hobbs, is still going to be if he's in charge of football, if there's some, backdoor agreement here where, now Greg is going to report directly to the president or however it's going to work. I mean, Sarge, what sense do you get about what's going on here, with that dynamic?
I've said this time and time again, and I'm going to say for probably the upteenth time that the way this university works, boosters don't fire Pat Hobbs, the media doesn't fire Pat Hobbs, fans don't fire Pat Hobbs, the president of the university fires Pat Hobbs. Robert Archie, the day after our softball reporting came out, has called for an independent investigation. They're going to do that. They're going to hire a law firm to investigate our findings, and if when the dust settles on that, then we could talk on the podcast, or I'm sure there will be some additional questions and reporting at that point. But as of whatever day it is, November 4th, Pat Hobbs is the AD, and he, it's almost silly to talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to dive into softball next, and there's a few things we want to talk about there. Obviously, the thing I do want to mention it's not just that. It's just this feeling, this vibe, whatever you want to call it, the whispers around Piscataway that Schiano didn't want to work for Hobbs, and that Hobbs didn't want to hire Schiano. I mean, it was, and obviously we all heard it. If you're anywhere near Piscataway, if you're stepping near the parking lot of the stadium, this is something that people were talking about. Kratz, do you think that this dynamic can work? Or are we looking at a situation where, even if it's 8 months from now, we're talking about a kind of a leadership change here because of those two personalities?
I think it can work because, look, let's think about this here. Everybody wins.
Yeah.
This might be the only place that's worth, this might be the only Power 5 job Greg Schiano can get, at this point in his career, given all that's happened. And if you're Pat Hobbs, and we'll get to softball, it's a very serious situation. If you're Pat Hobbs, if you want to just keep it strictly to, if Pat Hobbs can put on his, his time at Rutgers that I hired Steve Peichel and he took the team to the NCAA tournament and I brought Greg home, Pat might be remembered as the greatest AD in school history, a transformative, athletic director that built buildings and got the basketball program out of the abyss, and he hopes fix the football program by bringing the beloved son home. So I just think we're at a point now, and I've always kind of felt throughout this whole process that Greg needs Rutgers and Rutgers needs Greg.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes in life, you just kind of have to realize that there's a greater good involved. And I think that could be the situation here, that the two of them can augment their legacies and solidify their legacies if they come back and they work together and they get this thing turned around.
Right. All right. This is the furthest we've gotten into a podcast by far without mentioning the fact that the football team did in fact play a game. They lost to Illinois 38-10. I mentioned those two tidbits, obviously, about the scoring. I have to say I watched the first half of the game and I was like, well, you know what? This is exactly what this team has got it going. They're playing well defensively. They're playing tough, making, some smart decisions on offense. This is going to be a close game. And then it's exactly the second half was like, that 2 versus 15 game in the NCAA tournament where it's, okay, well, that's it. That's over. One quick, a couple of turnovers, and that was, quick touchdown. That was it. What did you guys see out of that game that makes you think that these last three games, is there any hope that you get out of it, or was it just kind of what you expected from Illinois? Kratz, what do you got?
About what I expected. I thought the Rutgers played better against the run than I expected, but still, Corbin was like a shoelace away a couple times from breaking a big run. I think that the offense is an issue. They found a way to kind of move the ball, getting manageable third downs with Lang in the past few weeks. But it's just not consistent enough to sustain drives on a regular basis. So, they might get a touchdown on you and look really good, but then they just can't get over the hump or they'll stall out. I think the defense is, everyone wants to say, what's the new guy going to do with the offense? The defense has got to get fixed. They give way too many big plays. They don't tackle well.
Yep.
That's a major issue. Looking to the final 3 games, I just shudder to think about the Ohio State game. That's just like, well, when we see Nunzio Campanelli next, I'm going to ask him, and I think he'll be honest, pretty blunt about it. I mean, what do you say to your kids as you're preparing to play Ohio State in this current situation? I think the Michigan State game is interesting to me just because they host the Illini this week. If they lose to Illinois, they're 4-5, and then they're going to get blown out by Michigan, and they'll be 4-6. Those kids might just say, we don't really they could go to a bowl game still because they have finished with Rutgers and Maryland, but does Michigan State want to go to a bowl game at this point? You're
talking about the Dallas Bowl or something bad. Yeah.
Do you really want to go strive to win out to go to the go to the Quick Lane Bowl? So I almost wonder if that could be a game where they have a chance to do something special, because if this all works out, it's It's the season finale. It's the day where they're honoring Eric. You assume Greg's going to be there on the field. This Michigan State team may have just quit. I don't know. Maybe they have a chance. We know Michigan State can't score points. Maybe they've got a chance to win, 10-9 or something, or it's a feel-good moment. And then Penn State, I don't think it'll be terribly ugly. I think Penn State at that point will probably be headed towards a big-time bowl and just want to get in, get out, stay healthy. I think it's like a 35-0 game.
Right.
But I don't see them scoring more than 2 touchdowns the rest of the way. Maybe they get one in garbage time against Ohio State and Penn State, and maybe they get one against Michigan State, but that's about it.
All right, let's dive into softball. And this is a tough topic. This is not usual podcast fodder for us. Obviously, our investigation. This is Matt Stanmeyer and USAR's put together what I thought was a very thorough story. It took several weeks to report. It's not the kind of story anybody wants to report or read. And I just want to make one thing clear about this. And if people are wondering the motives of this, and I've seen it on Twitter, email. I've heard people mention it as a topic on the message boards, that there's some sort of, conspiracy about us writing this, or some deep state thing going on here. Well, why we would pursue this. And Sarge, I want to just dive into like the timeline of, how this story came about, and really, why it's important for us to pursue it. And I think people, lose sight of what our role is, and the media in general. I don't want to get on a soapbox, and because believe me, you don't want to listen to me talk about my strong belief in the power of journalism here. But when people come to us with allegations of abuse that are serious, and they feel like they don't have a voice, they have nowhere else to go, no one else is listening to them. I mean, that's just kind of what we do. And that's the broader sense of good newspaper reporting, good reporting in general. So, Sarge, take me through like what timeline of how the story came about, and when you knew it was something that could be a serious situation.
Okay, so I got the letter from an attorney from Wisconsin. His name is Martin Greenberg. His name was mentioned in the reporting. I got that on Wednesday, September 4th at 1:10 p.m. I'm looking at the email right now. Martin Greenberg is interesting.
Okay, yeah.
September 4th. We obviously reported the story on October 30th, so we're talking 8 weeks to the day.
Right.
So that was, I guess a week into the season. There's no conspiracy theory that this was done, to get Hobbs out of the way for Greg Schiano or any of the other conspiracy theories. Yeah. Martin Greenberg is interesting because he represented one of the swimmers in the story that eventually led to the ouster of Petra Martin, the Rutgers women's swimming coach. And he reached out, and he was representing one of the players on the Rutgers softball team. Like any good reporter, I was skeptical at first. I read the letter. Some of it, seemed a little, if I'm going to be blunt, there was some stuff that you could be skeptical about. I think you and I had talked about it early on. We knew by mid-September that all hell was going to break loose on the football coaching search. We kind of had an indication right after the Boston College game that Chris Asher was going to be fired. We brought in Matt Stanmeyer, who is a AP. He's the best sports writer in the country, period. We could say all these awards that he's won, but I think you would agree he's the best sports writer.
Certainly, investigations and things like this, there's no one better. No question.
So he and I both, at that point, probably took us about 6 weeks to do our reporting, and in that time we got tons of documents. I mean, just from Ohio, we obtained a ton of documents that verified the reporting. And then at that point, we're not the judge and jury. All we're doing is laying out the allegations, verifying it. We hear one thing, we call another player. Did this happen? And that's what it was. So what it was all about from the beginning. We heard one set of allegations from this player who was being represented by Martin Greenberg in this legal document, and then we just proceeded to talk to just player after player after player. You have to keep in mind that Rutgers had 10 players transfer out over the course of, I guess it was about a year. 8 players in the NCAA transfer portal, which we had access to. Yeah. And we put it in the story. 8 players is twice as many as the next highest school in the Big Ten. So 8 players in the NCAA transfer portal would have raised an eyebrow to begin with. So, over the course of it, we just, we verified, and we talked to as many people, and we probably talked to, 40 people. Ultimately, we got document after document, and the end result was the story that the fans read.
And what frustrates me, a lot of people read it, and I think they said, "Well, come on, conditioning drills." And I get it. Like, these athletes are not they're not naive to run. And that's what bothers me. Like, this isn't the first time anybody told them to run a sprint. It was just the severity of it, and the toxic atmosphere. And believe me, when you read some of the things that, this assistant coach, a volunteer coach, I should say, the husband of Kristen Butler, the volleyball coach, had said to these athletes, and how uncomfortable he made them, and how this was a problem at his last coaching stop. And things like that are just red flags to me. I think that clearly the response from the university was poor. What do you think the response now is going to be, Sarge? I mean, how long? Do you have any idea what this investigation is going to be, and how long it's going to last, and what it means what it means for the entire program going forward?
No idea how long it's going to last. If you go back to the last time I think they did an independent investigation was with the Javon Tyree, David Cohen allegation that kind of turned into a question of whether Julie Herman actually talked to Javon Tyree's dad. I think that story broke in late October, early November. Everyone knows by now that the report came out on Super Bowl Media Day, which was 100% a Rutgers thing. They dropped it on Super Bowl Media Day. The Super Bowl was in New Jersey that year, so that was, I guess, almost 3 months, right? How long it took for the report to come out. I think we'll probably have a similar type deal where they'll hire a law firm, probably one that they've dealt with, in the past. The one thing, and I will say this with every fiber of my being, is that if they handle this investigation the right way, and they talk to not just current players, but the 10 players who transferred, that every one piece of our reporting will be verified. If anything else, and I speak to this because the 2 days after we did the reporting, we talked to even more players who came out and stood by the players who did talk to us. And they all verified it, and they all said, you should have called us, or you should have called me, or I would have talked. So if they do this investigation the right way, everything will be verified. It'll be up to, ultimately, I guess the investigation will probably look at whether any violations, with university bylaws or NCAA bylaws or anything else were committed with regards to either the conditioning or the allegation that she tried to revoke player scholarships without cause. All that type of stuff will be looked into. If they do it the right way, though, every single one of those stories will be verified. I have 100% confidence in that.
All right. So we're going to follow that reporting closely. There's much more to come. Again, a serious story, one that we have, it's a responsibility to look into, and, hopefully it'll be resolved. They're taking it seriously, at least, and that's a good sign. All right. I want to dive in, though, to the podcast questions, because the questions from Rutgers Insider, because we have so many of them, and it's just amazing. So again, if you're not subscribing yet, we gained several subscribers based on the news of the coaching search over the weekend. NJ.com /text to sign up, $5 a month. You get to chat with us, yell at us, text back and forth, and you get the news first before anybody else does. All right. So here's the first question I like, and it's an obvious one. Contract length in the 5-year range for Schiano. Kratch, I got to imagine that if you're Greg Schiano, you're coming in here, you have studied this roster, you know what it's got. It's got to be more than 5 years.
Yes, I would think if I'm Greg, I would ask for 7 or 8 years.
Right. So 8 years. No, that's crazy. 7, I think.
I mean, 7. Honestly, someone, some talking head said it, and then someone familiar with the program told me this. They might be 10 years away.
Oh my God.
From being a full-fledged. No, I think they're 10 years away from being like a Iowa, Wisconsin level. We can go win 7 or 8 games every year program.
Yeah,
I think they're probably 2 or 3 years away from being a bowl team. But if I were Greg, I would ask for. You just gave Steve Owens, the baseball coach, 6 years by all indications. So Greg should probably get 7.
Yeah, I agree with that. Another question, will there be a big commitment to obtaining excellent recruiters / coaches so they don't have to leave after a year or two for more money at another place? Sarge, we've discussed this. I don't think Greg Schiano is in the conversation if that's not a yes. I mean, what's your sense from behind the scenes as to what the commitment's going to be to the staff?
100% yes. That Greg Schiano, this is a major thing. My understanding is, aside from his the length of his contract and the money that he gets, is the money that he's able to pay to his assistant coaches. 100%. That's going to be a major thing. He wants to hire. My understanding is a Jersey-centric staff and a lot of guys that he's worked with in the past. The only way to do that is to be able to pay them. That is a major thing, the coaching pool.
Right. All right. This is a good one for along the lines of what could go wrong here. What are the reasons you see a deal possibly not getting done? Money, the amount of autonomy Schiano would want, something else. Kratz, I feel like the answer has got to be something as simple as they get into the room and it just doesn't work. I mean, there's some conversation. There's cold feet from Greg. I don't think I can't rule that out entirely. I mean, this is a guy who left the best defensive coordinator job in the world, because of family issues. I mean, what do you think? Is there anything that could sabotage this now?
Yeah, I think it could be possible that Greg realizes that maybe he prefer to be a position coach. I mean, I think that maybe after a year, if he's ready to work again, he could go right back to New England. You never know. I mean, I think all indications were that when he left the Patriots, he left under good terms with Bill Belichick. It's possible that Greg thinks to himself, this is going to be really hard, and I don't want to risk, tarnishing what I accomplished at Rutgers in the past. It's possible that another job could be signaled to him. I mean, we've talked about Steve Adazio is still the coach then, but I could see where a job like Boston College would have things that appeal to Greg that their Rutgers doesn't have.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, everything is look. It's Rutgers. I think the last week has reminded us that this is a different place.
Yes.
And anything can happen at any moment.
Absolutely. Great question. We alluded to it a little earlier, but he's talking about with the experience that Schiano has gained since Rutgers and the connections he made, will he have an immediate impact in recruiting? I think the answer is yes. And it's funny. I had to go back and look at it. When he first got the job the first time around, within 17 days, he got a kid from Montclair named Ricky Cook to commit. And it was a big whopping deal. You remember this, Sarge? And this is predates you by a million years. Ricky Cook, as I mentioned, this is funny because I wrote about him when they got Savon Huggins, which is, again, that was 8 years ago now. But, now he's a cop in Montclair. But he was like, and he didn't turn out to be a great player. But it was just this eye-opening moment where we're like, whoa, they got this kid? I mean, is that going to happen again, you think?
I do. I think, give Todger credit. He's already mentioned a couple of names of recruits, Jalen Berger, a couple others who would be intrigued by the prospects of playing with Greg Schiano. I believe my understanding is Greg Schiano, again, we're not talking underhanded stuff. I think he was recruiting Jalen Berger while he was at Ohio State as well. So make that clear. Right. But I think, right off the bat, that's obviously, a game-changing type offensive type player. Again, I think he's going to, try to dip into the grad transfer market. There's already 2 guys from Jersey in it right now, 2 impact guys from Jersey right now. So I think he's going to try to get it good in a hurry.
Right. All right. Another question. Everybody wants to talk about Schiano today. Obviously, aside from the salaries of the coaches and assistant coaches, what investments is Greg looking for? We hear about wanting, he wanted unlimited budget. What does that entail? Cratch, I don't think it entails an unlimited budget. I think it's very simple that, they're behind as much as they built, the practice fields are great. The facilities for basketball is important. The Hale Center is just kind of a dinosaur. And of course, the bubble is just unacceptable.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people speculate about this. I think there's a big confusion. I don't think Greg and Anna Brown built a $4 million locker room if the premise was that the Hale Center was going to get blown up and they were going to build a completely new thing in a couple of years.
Right.
My guess is that, and I think Sarge will test this, you as well, Steve, they need to replace the bubble. I think you're talking about a field house that's basically just a big barn doesn't have offices, doesn't have locker rooms, because that's right across the street at the stadium. And then at some point when the Rockin' Center opens and you have the soccer and the lacrosse programs move out, I think at that point it's just women's tennis you've got to get out of the Hale Center. And then it's 100% of football facilities. That's my guess, is that
massive renovation, maybe something along those lines to make it look like it, a little bit more.
Yes, obviously you have to do a lot of work there. But my guess is that you're going to have a field house that's just a big barn with a field, with a football field, and maybe a place where scouts can watch practice from a perch from above. But very basic, similar to the field house that the Giants and the Jets have. There's not offices, just a big kind of structure that has the practice field inside of it in heat. And then once all the other programs are out of the Hale Center, you kind of really renovate that and spruce that place up.
All right, here's one for you, Sergeant. It's about Pat Hobbs. What is his standing now with the major donor community and other university decision makers? I mean, this texter points out he's got 2 abuse scandals. A lot of people don't like the way he handled the coach. Certainly, people were horrified at the way he reacted to you when you were discussing the softball story. Is he damaged goods now, or has he done enough around that campus where people can, he can survive a storm like this and move forward?
Yeah, I don't know. Again, it goes back to, as far as I'm curious to see, what the how they handle that report, and whether, if ultimately they look at the allegations and they say, well, you had this since July and you did nothing about it, or what did you do during the season when these types of things were brought to you? What was your response? That's one issue. Number 2, as far as his standing in the community, look, the guy is just coming off a $100 million fundraising campaign, right, which is unprecedented. No AD has done that. You have to give him a ton of credit for that. There are buildings that that were built, and facilities and are being built. Have to give him a ton of credit. That does not happen by waving a magic wand. That happens by building camaraderie and being the face of the program. We've seen him as recently as a couple of weeks ago presiding over the Rotkin topping off ceremony, and you see him acting like an AD is supposed to, being very, very, very commanding, and shaking hands with donors, and commanding a lot of respect. That's the AD that he was only a couple of weeks ago. I think that that's the AD that he could probably be in the future. I still think, again, there's still questions with regards to how the university handles this going forward, and time will tell whether or not he comes out of that unscathed.
All right, we had 4 questions about this, and that's such a weird topic. Could we possibly lose Schiano to Florida State? I mean, I think the answer is no. I just didn't imagine that Florida State would do that. Am I missing something, Crash? Do you think is that on the radar?
No. Okay. I mean, look, I don't know what Florida State's going to do.
Crazy. It's paying $20 million to get rid of anybody. It's just amazing. It's amazing. But anyway, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think there's a very good chance that Florida State, where this is, it's kind of like, you look at the history of college football, there are programs that were dominant in the 40s and the 50s that, right, don't have a program anymore now. I think it's a very good chance that Florida State's just a faded superpower, and that moment has passed them. But yeah, they're going to be trying to hire Urban Meyer or Nick Saban or bring Jimbo back. I don't think they're going to be targeting Greg Schiano. I think he might be a good hire for them, but I can't see them being interested in Greg Schiano in the short window before Rutgers should close Greg out.
All right, final one from Project Insiders. Thanks again for all your questions. Wants to know, if a reunion does happen, does Greg Schiano have higher aspirations than Rutgers? And it's interesting because we've kind of have viewed him at returning and kind of finishing the job. But is he looking at this job like most coaches would, which is to say, I'm going to win here, get it back to a bowl game, and I'm going to get to my next place? Or is he at age 53 a different guy than the guy who interviewed at Michigan, interviewed at Miami, who left for the Bucks? Sarge, what do you think? Is he here to stay?
I think so. The one thing, and I remember talking to him, after Tampa Bay, I don't think I'm divulging anything by saying he told this to a lot of other people, but like his next stop, if he was going to get back into college as a head coach, the reason why I think he might have turned down a few things early on, he wanted to. He said to people that he wanted to win a national championship, that he wanted a program that was built to win a national championship. As it turned out, he's obviously taken another rebuilding program. Yeah, that's what he's taking over. To be honest with you, that might be what he's suited at. I mean, that's the one thing that on his resume you cannot take away from him. Like he built, the Rutgers program into a perennial bowl team, and if he does it again, if he rebuilds it, it's going to be obviously a spectacular rebuilding job. He's going to get a lot of national attention at that point if Rutgers gets back to a bowl game. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to speculate, but again, like he's a guy who does a lot of things the right way. We've talked about that before, and if he's not going to embarrass the university or any university, that I would think that if he's able to turn it around, his name, he's going to be a proven commodity.
Yep, that's true. All right. Anything else? There's actually a lot else. The hoops opener is on Thursday. Basketball, it has to get waits until 41 minutes into this podcast, and I apologize to Dave White personally that it took so long for us to get there. Let's talk about basketball for a minute, then wrestling, women's soccer. And I hope there is a time where we're doing a podcast in January where we're just talking up hoops because the team is so good and everyone's excited and the rack is rocking. I wonder this, Cratch, with the level of expectations, are we setting ourselves up for a big fall here?
That's a good question. I've thought about this a lot just because, remember last year when they lost to Fordham and how, kind of rough that was and how upset people were. And I was thinking the other day, we didn't really expect much from that team last year. And that Fordham loss still kind of hit like a freight train. If they were to lose to Niagara this coming week, people would be apoplectic. They'd be thinking, well, the NIT is shot out the door. We're done.
Yeah.
So there's going to be, the losses are going to weigh a lot heavier. And, the last 2 years, they've had some quirky, non-conference loss early in the year. And those losses really mean something this year because your goal is the NIT. So I think there's a very good chance. I did a season preview stuff that will run later in the week. It's a tough schedule. Yeah. There's a very good chance. And you look at that, they might play the game of their lives and still lose to Seton Hall by a point. That's going to be a massive moment. And Seton Hall might be Final Four caliber. You got to go to Pitt. So I think, the Big Ten schedules are bare. It's rough. I think there's a chance that this team is better than they were last year. But the record doesn't necessarily improve all that much. I
mean, just looking at it, Sarge, and you start with the 2 games, Bryan, Niagara, then Drexel, St. Bonaventure, Stephen F. Austin, NJIT, UMass. All right, you should get off to a really nice 7-0, 6-1 at the worst start. But then at Pitt, at Michigan State, versus Wisconsin, versus Seton Hall. I mean, that is a rough pre-Christmas slate for a team that is, you forget, it's still adding important new pieces, still a lot of young players who have to develop. I mean, what do you think is the ceiling and the likely level this team's going to reach?
Yeah, postseason NIT. I think improving on the record in the Big Ten. We said this before. I mean, if they're, I think they finished tied for 10th last year, like a 3-way tie. If they get up to 8th, they're on a bubble. I don't know if the non-conference schedule will be good enough to carry it because that's what the NCAA does look at. It's not just a conference record, but if they're able to get in that 8, 9, 10 pack, and then are able to get 16, 17 wins overall and get into the NIT, I think that's a successful year.
Okay, really quick, we've got a women's soccer team. They are in the semifinals of the Big Ten tournament next Friday. Is that right, Cratch?
Yes, at Ursack Field.
Hosting the semifinals.
So I believe they're going to play Michigan, and obviously if they win that, then they will go to Sunday's final. I don't believe times have been set for either the.
Will they beat Michigan? Is that an expected outcome? Soccer, I know, is a different sport than anything else, but are they favored?
I believe the Wolverines were ahead of them in the table. I can look that up right now, but By the way, they are 2 wins away on their home field from the first Big Ten title in school history.
Wow.
Which I think would be a pretty special moment for Rutgers, obviously, in what has been kind of a wild fall.
Yeah. Is home field assigned beforehand, or did they earn home field?
No, home field, it's predetermined. So last year the men's lacrosse tournament was here, and wrestling will be here in March. They predetermined gave them Yearsec Field, but they've had a good season. They got it. They were got a top 4. I believe they were maybe even the 2 seed in the Big Ten. It's been such a wild week. I haven't paid as close enough attention as I should have, but they were a top 4 seed, and obviously now they're in the Final Four, 2 wins away from a Big Ten title, which would be a pretty big moment.
Wrestling's getting started. Anything we need to know already, or is it just kind of the early stages here?
Early stages, they got a lot of depth. A young team kind of rebuilding, but they got 3 wins at the season opening quad, which is big because they've had 13 straight winning seasons, and it might get, every win's going to count this year potentially. They might have to piece this thing together to finish over 500 again. So to get 3 wins in this quad, to beat Pitt Johnstown, which is the number 1 ranked Division II team in the country, and then wrestling, Division II team a lot of times is Division I caliber kids who've got some academic issues or some off the mat issues. They just kind of go there and try to build themselves back up to go Division I. Women's basketball, I believe, opens up this week at South Alabama. Interesting opener. Vivian taking the team down there because they've got so many kids from Alabama and the Southeast on the roster now, so they're about to get going. So everything's kind of kicking into high gear here, and obviously 150th anniversary. Wednesday night they'll have the event at the Performing Arts Center. Barry Alvarez will be there, Jim Delaney, Pat Hobbs, Marco Battaglia, I think Brian Leonard, a bunch of former players, and maybe Greg Schiano.
All right. Well, fellas, no matter what happens, I can assure you it's going to be another interesting week. We'll be back on Monday to retell it all. I'm sure there's going to be, it's going to be fun. But for now, welcome back, Cotter. Let's play that theme song again next week, only maybe not. Steve Politi signing off. James Kratz, Keith Sargent, thanks for listening.
This is Acast Recommends. Every week we pick one of our favorite shows, and this is one we think you're going to love.
I'm Kimmy Culp. I'm a producer from shows like Good Morning America and The Oprah Winfrey Show. Join me as I sit down with some of the most inspiring people you've never met. People who have survived the unthinkable.
This shark attack, I definitely should have died.
And then I was blown up on the 29th of January.
I think a lot of people are like, thank God that's not me.
For every episode, we donate $2,000 to charities doing incredible work in the world. All the wiser. Find us wherever you get your podcasts.
Acast is home to the biggest podcasts from the U.S. and around the world. Subscribe to this show and hundreds more now via Acast or wherever you get your podcasts.